The day is finally here and I'm ready to install the Turbo Engineers 710 hybrid turbo into my B9 S4 Audi. It's a stock turbo housing that's been milled out on the inside and fitted with bigger guts. Let's dive into this thing and see what it's all about. If you're running your engine cover and the heat shield under it, it's time to remove it. The engine cover pulls right up and then the heat shield will have 4 plastic little screws holding it down. We're gonna pop the intake off. You want a 7mm. With that loosened, push the little button on the back and pull out. This part's pretty simple. You're gonna pull this tray towards you and up. Use a T25 Torx to bust loose these 2 screws up here. The intake can simply be wiggled out of its purchase. Unplug our O2 sensor wire. The way to do that is to kind of snake it out of this thing right here. Follow this cable down. Now we've got our wire out of the loom. Use your thumb to pull this little red tab out. So then there we go, it's loose. Now I've got my Tecton O2 socket attached to my wrench and we're gonna have to push pretty hard. Help the cable spin. Make sure it doesn't get caught up and super twisted. Let's remove the turbo to catalyst V-band. Crack that bad boy open. All right, take that whole thing. We'll position the screwdriver right here. Pop this off. There's one more in front of the turbo where my screwdriver is. It should be much the same. I think I'll pop this one off. We'll begin the removal of the upper PCV hose and they should pop right out. So that just squeezes. There is another squeezy component right here. It's the lower side of this tube. Maybe you can squeeze your finger in there. There we go. To remove this hose is gonna be a bit of a bear. It's very tight on there. I'm told by the factory manual that it's not meant to be removable. It's supposed to be replaced with the whole inlet. Moving it around makes it easier to pull off. Now I'm gonna show you removing the inlet itself, and this is gonna be tricky. There's a bolt up here. There's another little bolt right down there. So there we go, screws loose. Now they are captive screws. Baby turns on it until it's finger tight. I've got the lower screw undone, and you'd think we're done, but we're not. There's another little part of the PCV system that's right under there, and it's got another one of these style little clicky, not clicky, squeezy things. And that's where that connects right here. I want to thank our friends at 034 Motorsport for sponsoring this video. There is a link down below in the description of the product you saw today. Furthermore, I have Amazon affiliate links down in the description too to some of the tools and production gear used to make this video. If you click through and purchase anything at all on Amazon, doesn't even have to be the stuff I link to, I receive a small commission that helps me run this channel. With the inlet out of the way, we now need to remove the charge pipe connection. There's very little clearance. I've seen some people remove the charge pipe or push it back. Let's see if that's finger tight yet, and it is. And it is captive, it's not gonna fall out. The bottom bolt's gonna be a challenge. This is kind of what I came up with. I've got a very tiny, stubby quarter T30 up here, converter and a little extension, and I think it's just gonna fit. Once it's lined up, you can start cranking away on it. Now we need to remove this top oil line. It will probably make a mess. There's another T30 right back here for one of the coolant lines. Get that little bolt out. We do need to remove this bolt. Hopefully this provides enough flex in the line that I can pop it off. We have another coolant line right here. Nothing's really coming out of this one. Start by removing the vacuum line here. I believe these are 10s. I've got the bracket broken free. There is another vacuum line right here that we need to unplug. That's the little screw right there. I'm gonna use this T30 to get in there. that goes into the front of the turbo. So we just need to pull that out. Undo it over here. Snake it out of the way. Pull out our diverter valve connection. I'm gonna use the M10. Super easy fasteners. And now there's 2 more right here. Now it's time to get those bottom bolts, and they're 12s. Basically, I'm gonna hook around and get that second nut. This is a little more challenging. We've got one back there that should be fairly easy, and then the reason we took this off is to hit the last one from the side. We're gonna do the last bolt, and this one is accessible directly through here. Use the thinnest socket you have. Look from back here to make sure your socket's on. And mine looks to be out. Pry away the charge pipe. Kind of jam it up. And this one's also an M10 triple square. We don't need these gaskets anymore. We got new ones. Just remember the orientation. The PCV line's here, you see it going down. I'm gonna just try to use some pliers, some needle noses to get in there. I decided to try some angled, thinner pliers to get at the PCV line. We'll see how it goes. And even the factory manual says it's destroyed on removal, so I ended up just kind of snipping away at it with pliers until it popped off. Throw that out. But the main thing that I saw with the new revision is that they put this heat shielding on just this one little bit. Otherwise, it seems the same. I decided that I'd use some of this other heat shielding I have to kind of wrap more of it, because I have heard some people still melting theirs, especially with aftermarket turbos. And I'm using this Coolant thermo ice. So we should be able to just pop this stuff back in. That's a tough little plug. Make sure you feel that good click. We do have to remove this pipe, which is held down by one plastic screw. As soon as I started turning it, the head of it broke. I've heard on the forums this is not uncommon. Wow, that's in there really tight. I think it's fine without the screw. I've seen other people do it without the screw. With both turbos on the workbench, you can see just how much bigger the new turbo is on the inside. And I'm amazed I was able to run mid-11s on this little guy. This setup is what we call a hybrid turbo. It is essentially the same housing that's been milled out to accept the larger internals. What this does is it creates a plug-and-play system that can just drop in, replace one turbo for another. Pop this diverter valve off. Now I'm gonna pre-install the turbo blanket, take off our wastegate actuator. This is where we need to transplant this piece. First, we're gonna take a fresh new gasket. We can take out the oil return cap. I purchased a whole new gasket. Basically, it's one of these kind of deals, and it should just kind of pop in around the turbo. We can begin to install our 4-bar map sensors. We've got one right here and one hanging out down here. I like to take just the tiniest bit of motor oil. Let's see if this bolt's long enough. Ooh, if it is, it's gonna be hanging on by a thread at best. Yep, that is not gonna work. I spent a little time going around the garage trying to find a screw that fit. I remembered about these little things that hold the engine cover. Sure enough, they fit in here. So I will go to Home Depot later and find the right kind of screw, but for now, this should plug and play. There we go, the map sensors are in. Now we can take a look at our O-rings. These coolant ones are a little crusty. I'm gonna use a little screwdriver to pop this thing out. I pre-lube both of these with a little motor oil just to make life a little easier. Looks like we can do the oil supply one as well, although it looks pretty decent. We do need to throw in some new gaskets, and you want to go letter side up. There we go. Now the turbo's gonna smush that down. I'm thinking we need to pre-install this one retainer, and the other one I think we can slip on after we throw the turbo in. I'm hoping I can get under it, get this line right here into its hole. On the passenger side bank of the engine, the trick that I found is you take that retainer that I showed you to place on first and then squeeze under, but you also thread on the two nuts just a little bit. That is the real big trick, because it's very hard to thread those nuts on once the turbo's in place. You can still reach them, so the first nut that's closest to the front of the car, it's the same thing. You go through there with a socket on an extension, you bang it a little with a mallet, and then the back one is just a nice flat regular 12 mil ratcheting wrench will get it. On the driver's side bank of the engine, the rear one you can thread on with your fingers and then just use your standard flat regular 12 mil ratcheting wrench to secure it. And then for the front, add the nut to a magnet, get your two fingers right by the stud, and then use the magnet to position the nut, and then just turn it a little with your two fingers until it's threaded on. These should be torqued first to 15 Newton meters, and then you go around and you torque them again to 30 Newton meters. On the bottom ones, I don't have a good way to torque them accurately. I'm just going by feel. I spent a few minutes trying to figure out how to perfectly align the catalyst. The two surfaces need to be mated perfectly. Using this system of zip ties, I was able to line it up perfectly. If you have a second person, you probably won't need the zip ties. This V-band tightens to 7 Newton meters. After you run for a while and you let everything heat cycle, you come back and retorque. We've got this Liqui-Moly turbo additive, and this stuff is designed to be used for initial startup on new turbos. And we're gonna dump that into the oil supply. Gonna pull the little red cap out, take our additive, let that kinda soak in a little. We can insert our diverter valve. Get this coolant line installed. You don't need to muscle these hard, just give them a good little tap and that's about it. Now we can get the turbo blanket out of the way, and let's get this fitting in here. We also unhook the retainer for the hard coolant line here. Now we can swing this line over, pop it into our turbo. Now we can plug this vacuum line back in. Now we need to start fastening those charge pipes down there. Get that threaded in by hand as much as you can. The bottom one might be easier to do with just a little extension. I managed to tighten down the charge pipe, and that was quite a bit of work. You're gonna have to make different size tools, so I had to keep adjusting the length of this one to get to the bottom bolt. Now we can install the SuperDuper inlet, and first we need to apply a small amount of grease, and I'm using some PTFE lubricant that I have. I'm sure silicone would work. We want to install the lower bolt. We're gonna use that to kind of capture the new SuperDuper inlet. And I applied a little grease on my 66mm adapter ring that mates up to the TTE710. Place this thing carefully into the SuperDuper inlet. And that's what it should look like when you're done, and that lubrication really does help. I think we can squeeze this thing in here. There is a PCV line down here that we took off that you're gonna need to reconnect. It's got very little travel range on it, and it takes quite a bit of force to pop it in. Make sure you haven't lost your rubber seal. Add more grease if you need to, if it's falling off. And then you basically slot it on top of that little bolt that we just put in and made it up. So these bolts use an Allen key or a hex, whatever you want to call it. I think they're pretty much the same thing. And now we have that fun little one down there. Now we can insert this thing. Begin to reattach our intake. All right, guys, let's crank this thing up. I'm gonna go take it for a drive. And everyone's staring at me in the McDonald's parking lot. God damn. That's ridiculous, isn't it? This is f***ing dumb.
30, 60.
So we saw this thing start right up and do a few pulls. I can't even tell you how much fun it is. I think this car is just at the perfect level of horsepower right now. It's an insane amount of fun, but you don't feel like it's trying to kill you. Such an incredible sound, and the turbo kicks in and you feel that boost. It's kind of hard to translate it from some of the dash cam and cell phone footage that I showed you. That thing will get to 100 miles an hour like it's absolutely nothing. I think people who have been modding for a while can totally just pick this up and do it. But there are challenges. There's a lot of attention to detail. You want to make sure you don't damage anything. You have to keep track of small parts. You may need a few tools to reach inaccessible things, and it is going to tax your patience and your experience in modifying cars. You might be wondering why I didn't go for the TTE810, and that's a good question. The 810 was still not fully supported by 034 Motorsport, whose tune I'm using. That support has indeed come out now. It does seem worth it to go for the 810. I will have a follow-up video that's going to go through the entire car altogether. We're going to talk about what it would cost to build an equivalent build. We'll do some polls. We'll get some numbers. And of course, if you're interested in detailing, I do a lot of detailing content, so stay tuned for that. And I will see you really soon.